Your soulmate's mother is looking for you right now. She just stopped the wedding. My beloved child, before your thoughts race ahead, stay exactly where you are for one more moment, because what is unfolding behind the scenes is stranger than coincidence, gentler than fate, and far more meaningful than you have imagined. There is a quiet movement taking place that no crowd has noticed yet. While others are looking toward a celebration that seemed certain, someone unexpectedly stepped away from the noise. A woman whose heart has carried years of wisdom suddenly felt that something was missing. She could not explain it with logic, nor silence it with reason. It was as if an invisible thread kept pulling her attention toward a name she had never truly forgotten. What if the person searching for you has never actually met you, yet somehow already feels your presence? Pause on that thought. It may change the way you hear every word that follows. Stay a little longer, because the beginning of this story is only revealing the smallest piece of what is coming. There was no dramatic announcement. No loud argument. No chaos that demanded attention. Instead, everything changed through a single quiet decision. Just moments before promises were about to be spoken, your soulmate's mother looked around with an expression no one understood. The smiles around her suddenly felt incomplete. Every carefully arranged detail seemed perfect, yet her heart whispered that perfection without truth could never become peace. She asked herself a question she had never dared to ask before. Why does this moment feel unfinished? That question echoed louder than every voice in the room. Sometimes destiny does not arrive through thunder. Sometimes it enters as a gentle feeling that refuses to disappear. The more she tried to ignore it, the stronger it became. Have you ever wondered why certain people sense the truth before anyone else does? Perhaps this is one of those moments. Perhaps someone else's courage is preparing the path you never knew was waiting for you. Far away, without realizing it, you may have been living an ordinary day. You were thinking about responsibilities, hopes, unfinished dreams, or simply wondering why certain doors never seemed to open. Yet while your attention remained fixed on today's routine, another story was quietly turning in your direction. Invisible connections often work in silence long before visible results appear. That is why so many life-changing moments seem to arrive without warning. They are never truly sudden. They have been growing quietly beneath the surface for much longer than anyone realizes. Think about that for a second. How many times have you believed that nothing was happening, when in reality everything was already shifting? Wait until the final moment, because this hidden pattern becomes even clearer as the story unfolds. The mother could not explain why every conversation reminded her of someone she had never spoken to. Every reassuring answer sounded incomplete. Every celebration felt as though one important page had been left out of the story. She remembered little signs that had once seemed unimportant, unexpected conversations, unusual dreams, words spoken by complete strangers, moments she had dismissed because they appeared too ordinary to matter. Suddenly those scattered memories began fitting together like pieces of a puzzle. What if those moments had never been random? What if they were preparing her to recognize something at exactly the right time? Awareness often arrives this way. Quietly. Patiently. Then all at once, everything begins making sense. As those thoughts grew stronger, she stopped looking at appearances and started listening to intuition. It was no longer about choosing between one future and another. It became about choosing what felt undeniably genuine. She realized that certainty is not always loud. Sometimes it is the calm voice that continues speaking after every distraction has disappeared. That realization changed the atmosphere around her completely. Others noticed the silence in her expression but could not understand its meaning. They assumed she was simply reflecting. They had no idea she was standing at the edge of a decision capable of rewriting far more lives than anyone expected. Before you go any further, hear this carefully: the greatest turning points rarely announce themselves with excitement. They begin with someone brave enough to pause. Then something happened that no one had anticipated. Instead of asking how quickly the ceremony could continue, she quietly asked a different question. Is there something we have overlooked? The room became still. Not because anyone had the answer, but because everyone suddenly realized they had never considered the possibility. That single question carried extraordinary weight. It was not driven by fear. It was driven by honesty. And honesty has a remarkable way of revealing paths that certainty often hides. Could one sincere question redirect an entire future? You may think the answer is obvious. But the next chapter will reveal why that question led directly toward someone she never expected to search for, and why every step she takes from this moment begins pointing in your direction. Stay with this story, because what seems impossible now is only the first sign that something extraordinary has already begun. A quiet realization settled over the room before anyone spoke another word. Strange, isn't it? Sometimes the loudest turning point is created by complete silence. While everyone waited for the ceremony to continue, your soulmate's mother made a choice that no one had expected. She gently stepped away, not because she wished to create confusion, but because her heart refused to move forward without finding the missing truth. The celebration paused, conversation slowed, and curious eyes followed her every step. Yet she wasn't listening to the whispers around her anymore. She was following something much deeper, a feeling that had become impossible to ignore. Stay a little longer, because the next few moments reveal why this search was never truly about a wedding. It was about discovering the person who had unknowingly changed everything. She walked through familiar places with unfamiliar thoughts. Every memory she had once overlooked suddenly carried new meaning. She remembered hearing your name in passing months ago. At the time, it seemed like an ordinary conversation, one of countless moments that drift through everyday life. But now, those simple words returned with surprising clarity. It felt as though life had quietly preserved them for this exact day. Have you ever experienced a memory returning at precisely the right moment? Not because you forced yourself to remember, but because the timing finally made sense. That is exactly what was happening now. The more she reflected, the stronger her conviction became that someone important had been left out of a story that was never meant to be incomplete. Meanwhile, your soulmate had no idea how deeply this decision was affecting everything. They had been carrying unanswered emotions for longer than anyone realized. There had always been a quiet feeling that something essential was missing, yet they couldn't explain it. They smiled when expected, followed the path others believed was right, and tried convincing themselves that certainty would eventually arrive. But certainty never came. Instead, there was always a gentle hesitation hidden beneath every confident answer. Now, without knowing why, that hesitation finally had a voice. It wasn't fear. It wasn't regret. It was recognition. Recognition that the future should never be built while ignoring what the heart has been trying to say all along. As the search continued, unexpected connections began appearing one after another. A forgotten message. A conversation recalled at exactly the right time. A familiar place suddenly pointing toward a forgotten possibility. None of these moments seemed extraordinary on their own, yet together they created a picture impossible to dismiss. Isn't it remarkable how life often leaves quiet clues long before we understand their purpose? We call them coincidences simply because we haven't reached the chapter where they finally make sense. But once the pieces begin fitting together, coincidence starts looking remarkably like preparation. Wait until the end of this journey, because every clue is leading somewhere far more meaningful than anyone expected. Then she stopped for a moment and whispered something almost no one heard. If this feeling is true, I have to find them. Those words weren't spoken with urgency or panic. They carried calm determination. The kind that appears only after uncertainty has finally transformed into clarity. From that moment forward, the search was no longer based on questions. It was guided by purpose. And purpose has a remarkable way of opening doors that logic cannot even see. Perhaps you've been wondering why certain opportunities never reached you. Why some paths suddenly closed without explanation. Why timing has often felt delayed. What if those delays weren't preventing your story, but protecting its proper sequence? Imagine arriving too early to a chapter that wasn't ready to begin. Imagine discovering that every pause had quietly been preparing everyone involved for the exact moment when truth could finally be recognized. Sometimes waiting is not the absence of progress, it is the hidden work that makes the right meeting possible. Before this chapter closes, let me leave you with one thought. If this story has stirred something inside you, share your thoughts in the comments. I would genuinely like to know which moment spoke to you the most. And if these journeys of mystery, hope, and unexpected destiny resonate with you, subscribing simply means we'll continue exploring them together. There is still one remarkable revelation waiting ahead, and you may not see it coming. Because at this very moment, your soulmate's mother is closer than ever to uncovering the final piece of the puzzle. She doesn't know exactly where it will lead. She only knows she cannot stop searching now. And when she finally discovers the truth she has been chasing, someone else's carefully hidden secret will come into the light. That secret doesn't just explain why the wedding stopped. It reveals why your name has been quietly waiting at the center of this story all along. And that is where everything changes. Look closely at what happens next, because this is the chapter where quiet certainty becomes undeniable. The search had already begun, but now it was no longer driven by curiosity. It was guided by a feeling that refused to fade. Every conversation seemed to point in the same direction. Every unexpected encounter felt like another piece falling perfectly into place. Your soulmate's mother noticed something remarkable. The more she searched for answers, the calmer her heart became. Usually, searching creates uncertainty. This time, it created peace. That was the first sign that she was moving toward something real. You might miss the turning point if you rush through this moment, because the greatest discoveries rarely arrive with noise. They arrive with quiet confidence. She began speaking with people she trusted, not to seek approval, but to understand what she had been overlooking. One person remembered hearing your name in a conversation long ago. Another recalled a story that suddenly carried new meaning. Someone else mentioned a moment that had seemed completely ordinary at the time but now felt impossible to ignore. None of these people were trying to convince her of anything. Yet every small detail pointed toward the same invisible thread. Isn't it fascinating how truth often gathers through many tiny moments instead of one dramatic event? What once looked like scattered pieces were becoming a complete picture. The more she listened, the more she realized this wasn't about changing the future, it was about recognizing the future that had quietly been waiting all along. At the same time, your soulmate experienced something they couldn't explain. There was no message, no phone call, no obvious sign. Yet a deep sense of restlessness gave way to unexpected clarity. For the first time in a long while, they stopped asking what everyone else expected and began asking themselves a far more important question: what truly feels right? That single question changed everything. Sometimes the answers we spend years searching for appear only after we finally ask the right question. And once that question is spoken honestly, the path ahead begins revealing itself one step at a time. Meanwhile, your soulmate's mother found herself standing in a familiar place, but it felt completely different now. She paused, looked around, and smiled gently, not because she had reached the end of her search, but because she finally understood why the search had begun. She realized that life had been offering quiet hints for much longer than she had noticed. Every delay, every unexpected conversation, every change of plans, none of them had been meaningless. They were gentle invitations to pay closer attention. What if the moments you've called setbacks were actually careful preparations? What if every unexpected pause was guiding people toward a meeting that needed the right timing to unfold? As the evening settled, something remarkable happened. The atmosphere around everyone began to shift. The pressure that had surrounded the stopped wedding slowly transformed into thoughtful reflection. People stopped asking, "Why did this happen?" and started wondering, "What is this trying to reveal?" That change in perspective opened hearts in ways no argument ever could. Sometimes one sincere decision inspires many others to look beyond appearances and search for deeper meaning. This was becoming more than a family story. It was becoming a reminder that the strongest foundations are built on honesty, patience, and the courage to pause before taking the next step. Then came the moment that no one expected. Your soulmate's mother quietly looked at an old photograph resting inside a forgotten album. She studied it for only a few seconds, yet something about it made her stop completely. It wasn't the picture itself, it was the memory attached to it. A conversation. A smile. A promise spoken years ago that suddenly returned with crystal clarity. In that instant, she whispered softly, "Now I understand." Those 4 words carried more certainty than hours of discussion ever could. Before you leave this chapter, remember this: some truths don't arrive because we chase them. They arrive because we finally become ready to recognize them. And now that recognition has begun, the search is almost over. In the next part, the path finally leads to an unexpected meeting, one that answers the question everyone has been asking since the wedding stopped. When your soulmate's mother finally stands face to face with the person she has been searching for, a single conversation will reveal why your name has been echoing through this story from the very beginning, and why the future is about to take a direction that no one could have predicted. A new dawn was beginning to form, not in the sky, but in the hearts of everyone connected to this story. Think about this for a moment. How often does a single conversation change the direction of many lives? Far more often than we realize. Your soulmate's mother had followed every quiet sign, every unexpected memory, and every gentle feeling that refused to disappear. Now she stood only a few steps away from the answer she had been searching for. There was no dramatic entrance. No overwhelming announcement. Just a calm moment filled with extraordinary meaning. Sometimes destiny whispers before it speaks. And those who are willing to listen discover what others completely miss. Stay with this until the very end of this chapter, because the next few moments reveal why the wedding had to stop before the real story could begin. When the meeting finally happened, there was an unusual sense of familiarity in the air. It felt as though two separate journeys had been quietly moving toward the same destination for a very long time. Your soulmate's mother didn't begin with questions. She simply listened. She noticed your kindness, your patience, your quiet strength, and the way you carried hope even without expecting recognition. In that instant, many of her earlier doubts dissolved without anyone needing to explain them. She understood something important: the qualities that truly shape a future are often invisible at first glance. They are revealed only through character, honesty, and the choices a person makes when no one is watching. As the conversation continued, unexpected details surfaced naturally. Small stories connected with older memories. Familiar names appeared in completely new ways. What once seemed unrelated now fit together with remarkable clarity. It was almost as though every unanswered question had been waiting for this exact conversation before revealing its purpose. Have you noticed how life sometimes keeps its greatest answers hidden until every person involved is finally ready to understand them? That readiness cannot be rushed. It arrives only after growth has quietly taken place on every side. Meanwhile, your soulmate sensed that something meaningful had changed, even without knowing the full reason. The uncertainty that had lingered for so long began fading into calm expectation. Instead of feeling pulled in different directions, they experienced a rare sense of inner peace. For the first time, the future no longer looked confusing, it looked possible. Sometimes clarity doesn't arrive because circumstances suddenly become perfect. It arrives because hearts finally begin moving in the same direction. Then your soulmate's mother shared a simple thought that left everyone reflecting in silence. I almost moved forward without discovering what truly mattered. Those words carried no regret. They carried gratitude. Gratitude for the courage to pause before making a lifelong decision. Gratitude for listening instead of rushing. Gratitude for allowing truth to arrive naturally instead of forcing certainty too quickly. In that moment, everyone understood that the stopped wedding had never been the ending of a story. It had been the beginning of a much more meaningful chapter. If this journey has made you reflect on the quiet ways life guides us, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And if stories like this inspire you to keep looking for hope, purpose, and meaningful connections, subscribing simply means you'll be here when the next chapter begins. But don't think the mystery has ended. Just as everyone believed the final answer had finally appeared, your soulmate's mother received one last unexpected message. It wasn't long. It wasn't dramatic. Yet it contained a detail that no one had considered before. A forgotten promise from years ago had quietly connected your story with theirs long before anyone realized it. Suddenly, every coincidence seemed intentional. Every delay appeared meaningful. Every unexpected turn became part of a much larger design. Before this story reaches its conclusion, one final revelation still remains. A truth that doesn't simply explain why the wedding stopped. It explains why your path and your soulmate's path continued moving toward each other despite every obstacle. And when that final truth comes into the light, everyone will realize that what looked like an interruption was actually perfect timing from the very beginning. A single unanswered question remained, and strangely, it was the quietest one of all. By now,